Good afternoon and welcome to the July 7th special meeting of the Santa Rosa City Council. Madam Clerk, could you announce the roll, please?
Okay, I'll be doing a roll call, audible roll call. We'll start with Councilmember Carlstrom.
Present.
Councilmember Combs.
Present.
Councilmember Corsi.
Here.
Vice Mayor Schwedhelm.
Here.
Mayor Sawyer.
Here.
Councilmember Wysocki.
Present.
Councilmember Oliveras.
Here.
All council members are present, with Councilmember Combs teleconferencing in.
Thank you very much. And Madam City Attorney, could you announce the closed session, please? Or the results of the closed session, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The direction was given to council during closed session.
Thank you very much. Moving on to 6.1, Mr. McGlynn.
6.1, report, consideration for adoption of an urgency 90-day moratorium ordinance on certain residential rent increases, or alternatively introduction for adoption of an extension for 75 days of the moratorium ordinance on certain residential rent increases. Chuck Regalia presenting.
Thank you.
Mayor Sawyer and members of the council, as the city manager said, this afternoon we're considering extension of the urgency ordinance adopted by the council in May. As you'll recall, the city council adopted the moratorium on certain residential rent increases to not more than 3% in a cumulative 12-month period. This ordinance, number 4063, became effective on June 23rd for a 45-day period and is set to expire on August 6th, 2016, unless it's extended. The reason for this item today is to bring you an extension, two options for extension, so that we can have enough time to finish the work in preparation of the ordinance and the implementation program. Unless this ordinance is extended by an urgency ordinance, which, as you all know, requires a 5/7 vote by the council, the current moratorium will expire prior to the effective date of an ordinance to extend. In essence, we would have a 5-day gap between the existing ordinance and the proposed ordinance. A little more about background. This was originally introduced on May 10th, adopted on May 17th. June 23rd is the effective date. August 6th is when the moratorium expires. If you adopt an urgency ordinance today, it would become effective today, and a 90-day urgency ordinance would expire on October 4th unless it's extended. If you adopt a non-urgency ordinance today, it would have a second, you would introduce it today, it would have a second reading on July 12th and become effective August 11th. There is the 5-day gap. That ordinance would be, the 75-day ordinance would be effective until October 24th unless extended. What I'd like to do now is talk about the pros and cons of the issue that we think is most important, and that's this 5-day gap. On one side of that issue, given the short time frame, the fact that it's only 5 days, the fact that there's a long lead time for rent increase noticing, there's one line of thinking that says that we may not experience a lot of problems with this. However, in our view from the staff is we don't know that. And we think at the very least it's going to cause a lot of confusion. It's going to cause confusion among not only tenants but with landlords. And probably the most important effect of that confusion will be to redirect staff from the task of preparing the ordinance and preparing the implementation program to answering questions that we could avoid if we use the urgency method. Again, if we use the urgency method, we would eliminate any gap, provide greater clarity and continuity while the city staff involved continues their work to develop a comprehensive rent stabilization program. Again, we're all about avoiding confusion and additional questions where we have an opportunity to avoid those. With regard to the tasks underway, we have quite a program that we notified the council about the work that's underway about a week ago. The first task is preparation of the rent stabilization and just cause ordinance. This will be a combination of work with our consultant, the staff, and the members of our city attorney's office who have a big role to play here. Our original due date for the staff consultant work is, as it's listed here, was on August 15th, 2016. In the last few days, we have made this due date a little more aggressive, and what we plan to do is establish a city council meeting on August 16th and bring you that ordinance for adoption. If we're successful and you think it's an appropriate act, and we adopt it on that date, that ordinance would have an effective date after the introduction and the second reading and the 30 days for it to go into effect. It would go into effect on September 29th, 2016, so prior to the expiration of the moratorium, should you extend it today. So it's our recommendation that the council adopt an urgency ordinance extending the current moratorium on certain residential rent increases for a period of 90 days, which would become effective immediately and would last for the term that I mentioned to October 4th of 2016. In the alternative, if that isn't possible, we recommend that the council introduce for adoption an ordinance extending the moratorium on certain residential rent increases for a period of 75 days, and after the second reading, that would go into effect on August 11th and it would expire on October 24th. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Regalia. Council, questions? Seeing none, I'll move to public comment. Devin Cardenas?
Thank you, Council, and I'll be brief up here. We wanted to just congratulate the council on implementing the rent moratorium, and just to say we continue to get calls from tenants who were facing 30% rent increases. Those have been reduced to 3%. Karen Jones sitting here was just telling me she was facing a 10% rent increase. That's been reduced down to 3%. And so these calls are coming in. And so it's special when a policy, you see it directly affecting the material conditions of people's day-to-day lives. And so we hope and we very much urge you, I'm with the North Bay Organizing Project, to continue to implement the urgency ordinance, to extend it. It's having an impact on people's lives. We are very anticipatory of the actual policy being put in place because of the just cause eviction piece of it, which is not included in the current moratorium. But we really hope that this can be extended. We also want to thank Vice Mayor Schwedhelm for continuing to meet with us, Mayor Sawyer for taking the time to meet with us the other day and voicing the fact that you might not agree with the policy, but you see this as important for continuing in avoiding that confusion that city staff was referring to. So thank you very much, and we urge you to extend this urgency ordinance.
Thank you. Enrique Yarse.
Hi, Council. I like the haircut, Gary. Looking good. I just want to, echo what Davin was saying about this whole thing. Definitely, I've also been seeing friends of mine have been telling me that their rents have been increased, but then after I tell them about the moratorium, they've been able to get it back down to a reasonable 3%. And also, I'm glad to see that we're on the same page with Santa Rosa City Hall and the people's needs and everything. And thanks for this good work, and I'm really appreciative. And yeah, let's extend this moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the cards that I have on this item. Bring it back to the council. Council, any further questions before I entertain a motion? Mr. Corsi, you have this item.
going to move an urgency ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa imposing a 90-day moratorium on certain residential rent increases in the City of Santa Rosa and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Council, comments before the vote? Any comments? Mr. Corsi?
I'll make the comments. I think it's fairly obvious, but the intent of the council was clear when we passed this ordinance in the first place. We've got the moratorium as a way to take a time out while our staff crafts the rent control ordinance. This has helped, as we've heard, in the community. This urgency ordinance preserves the intent of the council, and it prevents the confusion with what could be otherwise an on-again, off-again situation. It also will avoid what unfortunately may be opportunistic rent hikes during the short window that would be created if we don't have this urgency ordinance. I appreciate my council colleagues keeping the intent in place and letting our staff do their job.
Thank you, Mr. Corsi. Ms. Combs, do you have any comments you'd like to make before we vote?
I just want to thank you and thank staff for having this special meeting so that we can go forward, hopefully with the intent of eliminating any possible gaps in coverage. And I thank you, Mr. Mayor, for making it possible to hold a special meeting and for me to call in for it. So thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you. Well, I do want to make it clear that I do continue to be uncomfortable with this rent control endeavor, but I also realize the need to mitigate, where possible, confusion and anxiety, at least additional confusion and anxiety being experienced by our tenants and our landlords and our staff, quite frankly, and will therefore be voting to extend the moratorium by adding my vote to meet the threshold of 5 votes. I'm not pleased, but I am willing to move forward. Your votes, council?
Mayor, I'll be taking a
Oh, that's right.
roll
It'll
call
be
vote.
audible. That's right. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with Councilmember Carlstrom,
Yes.
Councilmember Combs,
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Councilmember Corsi,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Schwedhelm,
No.
Mayor Sawyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Wysocki,
Yes.
Councilmember Oliveras.
No.
The motion passes with 5 yeses. Council members Schwedhelm and Oliveras voting no. Thank you, council. And we have no other items to discuss. We are adjourned.